on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Yeah, there we go, there we go, there we go, there we go. All right, I know it's right after lunch and everyone's in a food coma, but we're gonna try to keep you awake and keep you entertained this whole time as looks like a lot of people are still eating lunch, so this is your lunchtime show, I guess, lunch and a show, I love it. All right, so let's see, make sure this is going. There we go, all right. I wonder how many more people could be successful if we tear down the barriers that prevent them from being successful in the first place. Now, tearing down barriers isn't exactly a new concept, right? We've probably all heard it before. Let's tear down these barriers that hinder people and affect them in negative ways. But what I find is that we rarely ever actually focus on tearing down those barriers. What we do is we continuously come up with new ways to overcome the barriers that are in place, but we rarely ever actually focus our attention on identifying what these barriers are, why they hinder people, and working to prevent them from the very beginning. And so let's start with this image here. This image is from the Interaction Institute for Social Change. And what it's doing is it's demonstrating the difference between equality and equity. Essentially, what we're talking about here is distribution of resources. And what they're arguing is that you can't just give everyone the same exact resources and expect that to universally help everyone overcome their barriers and be successful. What you have to do is you have to give people the amount of resources and the types of resources that they actually need as an individual person to overcome their barriers and be successful. Equitable distribution of resources, not equal distribution. But the problem with always focusing on resources is that resources are really limited. We only have so much staffing, so much funding. We can really only provide so many resources, which in the end means that we can only really help so many people be successful. And so let's take a look at this next image here. This one is from the Center for Story-Based Strategy. And it's the same sort of concept here. You can see the equality and the equity, but they've added a third component to this image. And you can see in this third component, there are no more boxes, or in other words, there are no more resources. And there are no resources because the fence has been removed from the image, and the barrier that was preventing these people from being successful is no longer part of the equation. And so now, regardless of staffing, regardless of funding, regardless of how many boxes each person has, the system is set up so that everyone can be successful without having to rely on our limited number of resources. And so let's talk about some examples. I work in education. I work here at Kent State University. Woo. There it is. All right, there it is. So I work in education, and unfortunately, a lot of my students struggle in math. And so we provide all kinds of resources to help with math, right? We have tutoring, peer mentoring, webinars, workshops, all kinds of different things that are supposed to help students be more successful in math. But even with all of these resources, we still have a lot of students who struggle in that subject. And so what if we thought about things differently? What if instead of creating yet another tutoring program, what if we actually looked at the structure of these math classes and tried to figure out what the barriers are that are actually preventing these students from being successful? For example, our students who score lowest on their math placement tests are put into what we call developmental math. And developmental math is supposed to give you the basic skills that you need in order to be successful in your college-level math classes. The issue with these classes is that they're not taught in a face-to-face environment with really individualized instruction that's proven to be really helpful for students. These developmental courses are taught in a computer lab. And so we sit students down in front of a machine and we say, all right, do these online homeworks, do these online tests and quizzes, and we're basically expecting these students who have already proven that they're not that good at math, we're basically expecting them to teach themselves math. And then we wonder, we're like, well, they have all these resources, they have all these tutoring programs, all these things. Why aren't they being successful? Maybe the issue here is that it can't be fixed with yet another tutoring program. We have to look at the structure of this online self-taught environment and wonder why it's not working. And if we look at that barrier that is this online environment, and we start to tear that down, and we start to rework those classes, and we start to incorporate more face-to-face individualized instruction, would more of our students actually be able to be successful in those math classes? Another place that we see this is standardized testing. Oh, I heard some groans there. That's good, right? Standardized testing, right? A lot of people struggle with standardized testing, but there's lots of resources out there to help you. There's books, there's DVDs, you can pay for these $200 classes to take. You can do these online PowerPoint type things that help you. But even with all of these resources, there are still a lot of people who do poorly on standardized tests. So again, what if we thought about things differently? What if we tried to figure out what is the barrier there that's actually preventing these students from successfully completing these standardized tests? Perhaps that barrier is that we expect every single person, regardless of who they are, to demonstrate the knowledge that they have in one standardized way, which, let's face it, that's not very realistic. We all have different strengths, different weaknesses, different learning styles, and so if you demonstrate your knowledge in a slightly different way, or maybe if you're just not a good standardized test taker, you're pretty much set up for failure right from the very beginning, regardless of how many resources you take advantage of. And so if we looked at standardized testing and we tried to break down that barrier that is this one standard unit for everyone, and we tried to come up with different testing mechanisms that adapt to people's learning styles, that let everyone, regardless of their strengths and weaknesses, demonstrate the knowledge in the way that works the best for them, would more people be able to be successful in standardized testing? Something that I see a lot in the work that I do is that we continuously try to convince our students to engage in what we call high-impact experiences. Now, a high-impact experience could be lots of different things, but it's things like studying abroad for a semester in another country, or maybe doing an internship to get real-world practical experience in your field of interest. A high-impact experience is basically anything that makes your college experience even more beneficial than just going to class every day. And we give students all kinds of resources and information about what these high-impact experiences are and how to take advantage of them and how great it would be if you did it. Hooray, let's do it. But for some reason, there's so many people who don't engage in any of these opportunities in their time that they're in school. What are the barriers that are in place that are preventing them from doing so? Perhaps it's that they're worried about it fitting in their course sequencing and delaying graduation. Maybe we're not setting up our curriculum in a flexible enough way that actually allows time for these experiences. Or maybe students are looking at study abroad and going, oh man, there is no way I can afford that. It's way too expensive. Maybe we're not creating enough cost-effective options for study abroad that don't cost $1 million to be able to go do them. Or maybe we're not advertising study away experiences enough, where you can go study in another part of the United States, which is so much more cost-effective than studying abroad to another country, but it's just as beneficial as doing that. Or maybe it's a really fundamental barrier. Maybe a student doesn't want to do an internship because they don't have a car and they can't drive to that internship. Maybe we're not doing a good enough job of finding local internships that are within walking distance to campus, or having enough on-campus internships so all students, regardless of that barrier, if they have it, can engage in those experiences. If we work with our students and we identify these barriers and we work to break them down, how many more of our students would actually be able to engage in these high-impact experiences that are proven to be so very beneficial for them? Now, all of my examples are in education, right? Because that's where I work. That's the field that I know. This is what I know best. But shifting our focus to actually tearing down the barriers that hinder people, that's a concept that can be applied to really any field. And so I challenge you, think about the field that you're in, or maybe the field that you want to go into someday. Are there people in that field who work so hard, and we give them all the resources and all the information and all the support that they could ever need, but for some reason, they still aren't able to be successful? What are the barriers there that are preventing them from doing so? Because if we stop putting all this time and energy into creating new resource after new program after new workshop, and we start just universally tearing down these barriers that are blocking people in the first place, just imagine how many more people could actually be successful. Thank you.